Hello again, everyone, and welcome to the next session, Color It Connections, Engaging Caregivers in the Vision of Person-Centered Care. It is a delight to have with us today Jennifer Cornell, who is going to talk about the Color It journey, and highlighting a shared purpose that engages residents, families, and team members to work together to achieve positive change. And she'll talk about the initiatives that have evolved over these past years. So I hope that that you were able to join us for the session that Jen spoke at last month. But if you didn't, that's okay. Jennifer Cornell is the Director of Long-Term Care for the County of Grey, the responsibility for 3 long-term care communities, Lee Manor in Owen Sound, Grey Gables in Markdale, and Rockwood Terrace in Durham. I can attest to this. She is a highly respected long-term care and health system leader with over 20 years of progressively senior leadership roles. She's a transformational leader and focuses on person-led quality care and service initiatives, team development, and growth. It's been a pleasure to sit on many Ministry of Long-Term Care and other sector committees with Jennifer. I'm very much looking forward to hearing more about how Color It Connections engages caregivers. Over to you, Jen.
Great, thank you so much, Sam, for that really kind introduction. I'm so pleased to be here this morning to share the story of Grey County Long-Term Care's culture journey to our shared purpose and how we use that shared purpose to partner with families and caregivers. Sam highlighted this already. So Grey County is located 2 hours north of Toronto, is an upper tier municipality made up of 9 member municipalities. And we operate the 3 long-term care homes that Sam highlighted in the introduction. And I'll just shine a bit of a light. Grey Gables in 2021 opened a behavioral support transition unit in one of the home areas. And Rockwood Terrace in Durham is currently in the redevelopment process to rebuild a 128-bed home on adjacent property. So this is our Color It change journey, our Color It story. This is the story of a group of people leading, working, and living in long-term care homes, focused on creating a shared purpose, a vision, a promise that could help us during challenges and lead us forward into the future. It's a common goal that spoke to our call to serve that drives each of us that work in long-term care. It's a story of recognizing our fears, respecting the individuality of our communities, and acknowledging our dreams and making the decision to move forward. This all was leading us to realize that we could create the changes that we dreamed of if we had an emphasis on a shared purpose. So how did we get started? And some of you that joined me a few weeks ago for the other session, I talked a lot about this, and so I'll just give a high-level overview to catch up anyone else. So back in 2012, at the time, I was the executive director at Grey Gables. We were going through a significant challenge. It was a significant abuse investigation. We had already been talking about what our promise is to our residents, to the community, and to each other. And the challenges that we were experiencing just accelerated things. Abuse allegations, investigations, difficult press coverage, challenging morale. These can be so discouraging, and they can also spark the question of what defines us. Does this negative situation define us, or is it something else? And so we took the next step and started talking about what we wanted to define us. One of the group activities that we did during this stage was to bring people together to draw a picture of what they could imagine if everything was perfect. And it was as the groups described their pictures, their drawings, that we developed the words that make up our promise today. So I want you just to imagine small groups of staff, residents, and families gathered together there for a very serious purpose to talk about our future and our vision. And I handed out markers and big pieces of paper. So I did get some eye rolling, but all in all, everyone humored me and the results were better than I could ever have imagined. When the groups described their pictures, the energy in the room was so great, so hopeful, and so exciting. And we now had the words to describe why we show up every day. And so when they described their pictures, these are the many of the words kept coming up over and over and over again. And those are the words that make up our Color It Promise. And they're here. So we color it with community, with opportunity, with leadership, organizational quality and safety. Somebody may have twisted my arm, but safety and quality are words that came up time and time again. You as the center of all that we do, relationships, sometimes in other posters, the R is respect, but we often go back to relationships as being so key and so important. We wanted to color it with integrity and looking together for tomorrow into the future. And so the first 2 years, we continued to talk about Color It, which became our words for resident-centered care. This shared purpose, and people started using the language in circle of care meetings, on care plans, and in care conferences. In the beginning, creating the common goal or the shared purpose was setting the foundation of who we wanted to be and how we wanted to behave, particularly given the challenges that we were facing. I think there was a period of time where ministry inspectors were basically camped in the home for a good part of 3 months. W5 was calling me weekly for a while, looking for the scoop and this story. And we were honest and transparent with the challenges that were happening, and also choosing to be architects of what we did with this terrible thing that had happened and how it would move us forward in a much better way. It evolved over the years to be our shared purpose, not only in our care and service for our residents, but also in our relationships with our staff, and finally, our relationships with our family members, the essential caregivers. In the time I have with you today, I'll share some of our stories and learnings as we expanded our Color It vision to include and engage our family members. So we had our promise. We had the words that describe and clarify our commitment to person-centered care. We were well on our way, right? Yes and no. The hardest part of those days, and still we have some, is being vulnerable to know that while we're clear on our purpose, sometimes our behavior doesn't match. And in those circumstances, we need to say it out loud, and then we need to move to be better. Long-term care can be fraught with urgency and stressful emotions. And I know I missed Deborah's presentation this morning, but I'm confident that she talked about the challenges and the emotions and the stress that there is all the way around when someone is being introduced into long-term care, moving into long-term care. It can feel like a simmering pot for everyone, for residents, families, and staff. Our shared purpose helps me and helps us to take a breath and remember not to be hooked by the urgency, but to let our Color It promise guide us in our response to whatever challenging situation we might be facing. Having a shared and understood purpose doesn't happen by itself. It happens with intentional leadership. And I casually mentioned that this started back in 2012. That's a long time ago. Culture change is an intentional and time-consuming evolution. It's completely worth it. And at my stage in life, I might hazard to say it could be like managing one's weight. It's not something that happens overnight. It's with consistent application and kind of stick-to-itness that eventually you start to see those results that spur you on and motivate you. And that's the approach that we've taken. We worked with leadership coaching, we use reflective practice, and most importantly, this culture change wasn't a place to get to, but a lens to look through. What's the colorate lens on any given situation? For example, what does person-centered admission look like? And through team member discussion and talking to residents and families, we now talk about a colorate move-in. Over the years, it was easy to see that person-centered approach could apply to everyone, staff and families. Every new challenge or opportunity is a chance for us to use the vision as a guide to our next steps. The pandemic was a catalyst, and while I'll always be sad and heavy-hearted on the terrible and horrific impact that COVID-19 had on people in long-term care, I can see some good that has come from shining a light on what desperately needed to be changed and the many opportunities to build our care teams to include the people that care the most about our residents, our family members, and our essential care partners. So Color-It allowed us to step back and reflect on who we really are and who did we want to be in the early days of the pandemic. I probably don't have to remind everyone, but I will, that in those days, everyone was afraid and worried. Response seemed always a little too late. Things shifted very quickly to command and control. You remember the iron ring, and we didn't always get it right. But we always used Color It Your Way to guide us. And I have a sticky note that still is on my computer monitor that I used a lot during the pandemic, and it was to prioritize the health, safety, and well-being of the people who live in our homes, visit our homes, and work in our homes. And anytime I was faced with a really difficult pandemic-related or any related decision, I would go back to that priority to help think through what the options were. When the doors were locked, residents were being isolated, families and friends were not able to come in, and everyone was desperate for information, we knew that there had to be a way through, even if it was difficult. What really acted to spur us on was staff noticing and voicing their concerns about residents failing under these isolating conditions. Staff members, team members were struggling to be all the things that they wanted to be for residents, and could see the impact that that was having on the residents and the residents' loved ones. So we knew we had to engage families to be part of the problem solving. If we could have solved it ourselves, we would have already. And so that prompted 3 programs that I just want to touch base on. Our Color It Connect program, which was our communication answer to some of these isolation strategies that we were having, or issues that we were having. And this was a partnership. This program came about in partnership with our communications team at the County of Grey, who in those days spent quite a bit of time supporting us with updating the community broadly, and residents and families and staff about directive changes and approaches that we were taking. The IT staff and the technology that we had at our fingertips. And the Color It Connect program is still in place today to better support Zoom and Teams connections, like video connecting with residents and people that aren't able to come into the home. We had a scheduling system to schedule outdoor visits, eventually to schedule indoor visits, and it really helped provide some framework and structure that people were looking for to answer some of these challenges that we were facing. Then we started holding virtual family meetings, so town halls over Zoom, and that eventually led to the development of our designated care partner program. So during the pandemic, virtual family meetings were held regularly, and I'll share with you that that first virtual family call was one of the most terrifying things that I've ever done. Our format was quite similar to today. It was an introduction from my colleague, the communications manager, who moderated the call. It was at 7 p.m. at night because I felt that it was important that everyone have easier access to be able to join. So it needed to be in the evening when lots of caregivers who work would potentially not be at work. We recorded and live streamed the virtual call so that family members could share the link to the call amongst themselves. I have a YouTube. I don't actually have my own YouTube channel, but I'm featured a lot, it seems, on the Grey County YouTube channel. And so my colleague Rob would do the introduction. I would give an update on the very many directives and changes and how we were handling things in that moment. And then we would go to a Q&A. The first call had almost 100 people on the line, and as I mentioned, was being recorded. I was so nervous that I wouldn't be able to answer all of the questions, and some I couldn't. And families didn't hold back. And I did my best to answer questions for a full 40 minutes. The video was shared hundreds of times, and we follow that same format today, albeit with a smaller attendance, but they do get passed around, and I try to provide regular updates of things that I know people are looking for information on. Even though it was via Zoom, it was building trust and building a relationship. And during those calls, I started to establish a bit of a call a friend. So I support teams in 3 homes. And so some questions would be very specific about a specific process at one of the homes. And I may not know the answer for that specific home. So the question would be read out loud. And then I would mention that I'm not sure. And within seconds, a team member would answer the question via text or Teams, and then I would be able to relay that question back. And so we fondly call that call a friend or phone a friend. And it wasn't after too long that when visiting the homes, I would run into family members in the parking lot, and they'd say, "Oh, I know you from those virtual calls." And it made me feel really good that we invested that energy and time and value into building that relationship and giving people information and answering some really, really hard questions that needed to be answered. And often those questions helped us see that maybe some of our strategies were off track. And so it allowed us to then go back and change some of our approach because it wasn't meeting the needs of the residents or the families. And so we would reassess that. And that's what led to the design of our designated care partner program. In those calls, we heard what we already knew. People wanted to be in the home, safely providing support. So we embarked on creating the pilot program called the Designated Care Partner Program that reflected our promise, allowing residents to have their caregivers safely supporting them at the bedside, even during a lockdown. And so we reached out for support from team members in all departments, including the medical director. We included family and residence council, residents and family members. We did staff huddles to talk about what their fears were, what their concerns were, and we drafted a policy that was reviewed by family council, family members, and residents. And what did we learn during that engagement? We learned that staff in particular were worried about increasing the number of people in our homes. That was a concern for them. They were worried that people wouldn't have the training and education that they needed in IPAC and infection prevention and control and testing. And we knew from the virtual family calls that families were willing to do anything, even nasopharyngeal swabs every 7 days. They were willing to do that. They were willing to learn everything that they could. So we developed an accessible education program that covered infection control measures. And we provided DCPs with the necessary training. And we offered that in 3 ways. We had an online learning that we partnered with our learning platform we use for staff. We had a hard copy version, and we did in-person training when it was necessary. We also used train the trainer approach, and our IPAC team educated our screeners so that they could provide refreshers to our designated care partners when they came in. Our team recognized the value in the DCP role, and as the DCPs would be providing many support in many ways, they wanted to be able to support that. And DCPs provide support, and you'd all know this, emotional and physical needs, nutritional intake, communication, personal care, and I don't need to tell you, you know this. We learned that it was important for our staff and DCPs to be one Color-It team, a team that was working together to achieve a common goal. And over the past 2 years, we've provided consistent communication to residents, families, DCPs, and staff. We do regular updates through our town halls. There's an email distribution list, newsletters, monthly refreshers, and this continues today. The question that we are always asking ourselves is, how do we color it for our residents, and what's our path to yes? And this visiting restriction was the question that prompted that. And I'm just going to flip to the next slide, which is a 5-minute video that really summarizes the DCP program. And this was a partnership with Briere, CLRI, and Grey County as part of a research study. And this video was produced by that group, and I'm really pleased to share it with you. And let's see. Maybe someone could give me a thumbs up when you can hear music, which will be after the spinning donut.
Hey, Jen, there's no sound coming through.
Just how important those people.
Yep, worked that time.
Family presence in long-term care has really gone for decades as an unacknowledged contribution to people that are living in long-term care. People move in and they become a resident, and they still depend on and look forward to and rely on the people in their lives from before they lived in long-term care. And it was really during the pandemic that there became a formal acknowledgement of the contribution of family members and friends, and just how important those people are to the people who live in long-term care.
Designated care partners, or DCPs as we call them here at Briere, are also called essential care partners, ECPs, and other organizations. And what they are family members, friends, anyone the resident feels comfortable to have come in and be part of their care team to provide different aspects of their care. The difference between a visitor and a DCP or essential care partner role comes down to many things, one being training. So they're learning about the rules, learning how to do things safely. It gives them a sense of responsibility, they have a sense of accountability, and they're members of the team. They're not there to replace staff, they're working with the staff to provide the best care possible for their loved one.
They are a valuable member of the team. That by becoming a DCP or a designated care partner, you end up being not just a visitor. It doesn't mean that you have to come in and dress and bathe and all those cares, but your level of comfort and where you would like to have your visit begin and end, we can do that with the DCP program.
Essential care partners are essential because they are the connection between the resident and the support team that's here. It's an advocate, it's a loved one, it's someone who knows the resident best.
There are a number of key findings from our research, and I would say the first is the very simple but important finding that essential care partners are essential. When essential care partners are barred from the home, there are declines in well-being. When they're allowed back in, things improve. The most dramatic example of this that we found had to do with people living with dementia, people living with Alzheimer's in long-term care homes.
I don't think any of us knew the extent of the importance until the pandemic. For someone who had Alzheimer's disease or anyone with dementia, he's already isolated, isn't he, in his own little cocoon until that magic moment when we could get together because of the DCP program. It's just the magic of connection, and it was pure joy. It's also important to know how much you'll receive yourself from the experience. Continuing your memories, and you'll be surprised how much you get back yourself, not only with the resident that you care so much about and you're visiting, but others who are there too, if you're able to just let them know that you see them and you're interested in their welfare.
You always see the joy in their face for them to actually be granted that access. For example, the couples that have been together the longest, they haven't been away from their loved one for the last 40 years they've been together. Navigating all that stuff, even when it's very onerous, they have to get tested to come into the residence, but they understand that it all comes down to protecting their loved one, but also to guaranteeing that continued connection with the loved ones.
I see an opportunity for us to take that into the future so that it isn't just about how do we have people safely visiting during an outbreak, but how do we have residents, family members, and friends as part of the care team for the time that they live in long-term care. Essential caregivers or designated care partners, and there's different names, but it's all this formal acknowledgement of someone that the resident designates from outside the community as part of their care team. Care partners, residents, team members, which is our words for staff, they all play a role in developing our programs and our policies, and we're always looking at opportunities to include the DCPs in the day-to-day care and planning for the experience of people who live here. Family presence and friend presence in the home makes a place a community and a home, not just a long-term care facility. It's a place where people live, it's a place to find joy, it's a place that we want to give people a life worth living.
Thanks. The emojis are really helpful when I can't see you, so I really appreciate being able to see your emojis. So that's the short version of the video, and if you are interested, there's also an 11-ish minute video, and those are available on the CLRI website and can be used to kind of familiarize family members and team members, staff with the idea of formalizing the DCP program. I'm just going to do a sound check that you can hear me still talking. Yes, okay, great, thanks. So in July of 2021, I have this slide because I wanted to share another way that we engaged with family members and friends of our residents in a more formal way that we really hadn't done before. And so we were still in the early stages of the designated care partner program, and I probably spent too much time of my life when I wasn't at work on Twitter, trying to figure out what was going on in the world outside of my own community, province, and country, and how others were handling the pandemic. And in those days, Twitter was a good place to get some of that information. And there was a tweet from Kate Duchek, who is a researcher, and she put out this offer that if there's anyone in Ontario who is doing some sort of a formal designated care partner program, and they want to do a formal evaluation process and a research paper, that she and a colleague, Christine Shepherd, would do so, provide that support at no charge. And I was the only one that responded, so lucky for me, and had this opportunity to work with Kate and Christine, who really guided us through a much more formal process of getting feedback and engaging with individuals through survey and interviews and discussions. And the research paper is, the full report is on, I think there's a link with the presentation, and if not, I can get that to Sam and her team, and there is a link to it on our website at Grey County. And the report included their demographic, the impact, their role, their experience, and really importantly, their recommendations for moving forward. In the interest of time, I'll just highlight that there's a couple of slides that will be distributed. They're available to you. These just highlight the feedback that came from those surveys and that engagement. And many times over the years, some of which were very dark and very stressful, we were reminded firsthand just how lucky we were to have caregivers safely in the home at the bedside, supporting not just residents, but also the staff. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I maintain that if we are fueled by gratitude alone, the thanks and the words of support from DCPs and residents are what get us through and what sustain us. And that was evident in the feedback and recommendations that came through that formal engagement. Another kind of silver lining that I want to share, or learning from really building on this relationship and formalizing the engagement with our DCPs, was this role during outbreaks. And it's not something that we would have asked of caregivers and family members prior to the pandemic. We would have felt that if we were struggling because of short-staffed or in an outbreak, we need to fully take on the responsibility of solving that problem ourselves as the long-term care home. And we do have the lion's share of solving that problem, but we're all one team. We're on the same team with the same goal. And so while we didn't have a number of outbreaks in the first few waves of the pandemic, we weren't fully spared. And I can't remember if it was the fourth wave or the fifth wave, and I can't even remember what year it was, but it was over Christmas, starting in December to February. All three of our homes experienced significant COVID outbreaks. We had many COVID positive residents and staff, and it was causing significant staffing shortages. And when we asked the DCP, the DCP stepped up and provided all kinds of support. They adjusted their visiting times to be around meals to provide support with delivering trays. They assisted their loved ones with ADLs. They helped with cleaning high touch surfaces. They provided emotional support, cheerleading, and so much more. And if we hadn't been actively working on building a relationship and engaging, we just wouldn't have had that opportunity, and we wouldn't have had that support. And I'm so grateful, because it really did get the broad us through a really difficult time. And this slide highlights some of the other research projects and papers that we've had an opportunity to be part of. So check those out if you're interested. So as we continue to navigate post-pandemic, we look for opportunities to use the Color It Your Way lens to include and engage our families and care partners. Some examples are the move-in process, the ongoing evolution of the DCP program from a response to visiting restrictions to supporting our care partners as members of the team, creating a formalized space in care conferences for DCPs, reviewing and providing feedback and input into the questions that make up our experience surveys. And then this slide just carries on in really looking to include designated care partners as part of our day-to-day operations, our internal, and it can be little things that really aren't so little. So all of our internal communications are now addressed to staff, to residents, staff, and designated care partners, internal memos, etc. DCPs, as I mentioned, are part of our data collection and part of our future planning. And it's really led us into some more of the idea around co-design. And so this is a busy slide with lots of stuff on it. But what this is really about is how we approached the question about universal masking. So as you know, universal masking, that mandate was lifted sometime in the spring, heading into summer. Maybe it was summer time. I've lost track of all sorts of time. And the residents in the homes were so thrilled that staff were able to have their faces showing. And we have lots of great quotes from residents talking about how they didn't recognize some of their healthcare partners, like some of the staff, because they had never seen their full face, and how they could hear them so much better. So as we were heading into an atypical respiratory season, so in August, we were starting to hear that other organizations had gone back to universal masking, some hospitals, some long-term care homes, and we were faced with, what should we do? And we've been really intentionally trying to get away from command and control and more into this shared decision-making. So all three of the homes pulled together groups led by the infection control lead. And the groups of people were made up of family members, DCPs, residents, and staff. And they used the ethical framework that you see on the screen to work through the question of whether or not we should mandate universal masking. And then they provided a recommendation to senior leadership. And in August, their recommendation was no to universal masking, but a strong emphasis on encouraging mask use, being mask friendly, making sure that anyone who wants to mask can mask, but they didn't want it universally mandated. So that's what we did. That was the communication that went to residents, staff, and families, and then more broadly to the greater community. Then in September, things were kind of escalating in the land of outbreaks. And so those groups were pulled together again to do another review. And that was the agreement when we met the first time, that we would be doing this on an ongoing basis. So that group came back together, and this time they turned the dial up. So they still didn't want to recommend full masking universally, no matter what was going on in the home. But the minute any of the home areas were in suspect outbreak, it would be universal masking across the whole house. And that was their recommendation. And that's what we did. And then about a week later, the Ministry of Long-Term Care did put out a directive to mandate universal masking. And so then we moved to universal masking. And it's not everyone loved this approach. I got a lot of phone calls that week from as many people who felt we were overreacting as people who felt we were underreacting. But I could feel very confident that it was we took a balanced approach using an ethical framework that truly was co-design. Residents and their families had more than a token opportunity to provide their feedback. It was really a recommendation driven by their educated feedback. And I was really, really pleased about that. And so we continue to look to build our relationship with our family members and our designated care partners. And I'm pleased to say that we've had the chance to work with Deborah Bakhti, who you got to meet this morning. And so in June, our 3 family councils hosted our first virtual family event with guest speaker Deborah Bakhti. And you know what she authors and you know her story. And this was driven by our family council. It was a family council member who discovered Deborah and made the link with us, and who really drove the idea of the family councils coming together to host a virtual event. I knew it would be well received, but it was better than I could have ever imagined. A number of family members joined the call. Deborah led an amazing event, and people were really vulnerable and quick to share their experience. And it was beneficial for family members to see that they weren't alone in the way they were feeling. And it was really beneficial for staff and leaders to feel what families are feeling. And it was great. And then it moved us to continue our relationship with Deborah and broaden it. And so just last week, Deborah was the keynote speaker for a Grey County Leadership Day, a long-term care leadership day, where 60 leaders from across the 3 homes came together to focus on bridging the gap between families and staff. And our next plans take this knowledge to the frontline caregivers, with our plans for a Take the Lead program, which is a train the trainer type program to build champions and capacity to build relationships, to be able to include our family members and designated care partners as part of our care team. And I'm really excited about this, what's coming. And so as we color it into tomorrow, I'll say it again, that our Color It team believes that DCPs and family members are an important part of our care team. They're a voice to support their loved one, to help us create a truly person-centered care. And in the words of Janet, one of our DCPs, it's magic, it's connection, it's life, and it's love. And that's the value of a DCP program. And so we're always actively looking for ways to adapt what we've always done to include designated care partners. It's still an evolution. It's engagement and co-design. It's not cookie cutter. It's an ongoing process, as I mentioned, a 10+ year journey that we've been on so far. And as director, it's my job as the leader to hold the standard. I'm the keeper of the vision and hold accountability. And having a foundational vision that we all are on board with helps me to feel better about facing those big challenges. And I've shared this before at the ending of other sessions. It's tempting for us to get sucked into responding to the urgencies of the day and challenges with fear and worry, and to put our head down. But when we shift our perspective, and it becomes easier to see that our accountability is to color it for the residents. And by doing so, we'll face those challenges, those urgencies, those regulations. The truth is that we'll see and find problems no matter what we're focusing on. So when we shift to the focus and we pay intentional attention on how we want to behave, how we want to be seen, we look for and notice those opportunities to live up to our Color It Your Way promise. When we remember that everyone is doing their best and we're all on the same team, that's what leads us to a truly transformed long-term care sector in our future. So use your mission, use your vision or your promise. If it doesn't serve you, talk with your teams, talk with if your family members and family council, talk with the leadership. Change it, change the vision if it doesn't serve you, because that's what will ground you and that's what will guide you. And thank you so much for your attention and your time today. And I'm going to stop sharing. Maybe. I think I am.
Hi, Jennifer. Thank you so much. What a wonderful session. And again, just I know that there have been people in the chat saying that your work is amazing. You're continuing to deepen your work. bringing in additional partners, and just spreading the word of what you're doing across the long-term care sector. So kudos and congratulations to doing that. A question we have is, can you give tips to homes that are looking to engage in co-design of communications, policies, and initiatives with caregivers? So what would you tell them when the idea of giving up that power or control is a little bit scary or intimidating?
So it is definitely a scary thing, and I think our human nature is to make up stories, right? So we make up stories about the risks that will come from sharing some of that responsibility. And so I think this was a book from when I started in my career, and it's something like Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. But practical suggestions are, there's a lot of resources out there. You don't have to make this up from scratch. There's lots of stuff on the Grey County website that you're welcome to use. But there are full organizations dedicated to supporting the development of this work. The Ontario Caregiver Organization, CLRI, Family Councils of Ontario, work that's partnerships from those groups working together. And there are toolkits. So don't start from scratch, and find some like-minded champions. So people on your leadership team, people on your family council who are passionate and courageous, and then just start having those conversations a little bit at a time. And you can't change it overnight. The pandemic was a catalyst that accelerated some things, and we benefited from that. But then there were some stalls. So visiting restrictions are lifted. We have a phase where, well, we don't need DCPs anymore. Whoa. Yes, we do. Let's talk about what the perspective is and what their role is. And so you have to go back and talk about that again.
Thank you. Yeah, I love that you're saying it's always kind of an ongoing process, and really letting the fear get to you. You know, you what's the worst thing that could happen? At least give it a try. It goes really badly, well, at least you can say you tried it. There's a question asking if you've done this presentation with long-term care homes and with staff.
So yes-ish. So this presentation continues to evolve to kind of highlight some of the work as we continue to go on. We had the chance to share versions of this work at the Advantage conference in partnership with CLRI and Briere. Excuse me, working with Ontario Caregiver and Ontario Caregiver Organization, having the chance to be part of videos like the one that I shared in the presentation. So yes, when there's a chance. So I secretly, not so secretly, believe that part of my life work must be to help change the narrative of long-term care. So it's super simple and easy. The communications team always looks at me a little bit with a side eye, because long-term care, we have lots of work to do, and there's lots of amazing work happening. And I think we need to have a balance of shining the light where there's opportunities to make improvements, but also highlighting the amazing work. There's thousands of team members and family council members that are working tirelessly to make long-term care experience a better place to live and a better place to work. And it's important that we talk about that. So when I'm asked and offered an opportunity, I almost always say yes, because I think it's important to share the word. And I'm super proud of my team. I just get to tell the story. This work was done by the 600 team members that work in Grey County long-term care. They're the ones that made this come to life, and the over 400 designated care partners that we have now.
Wonderful. I like that you mentioned the word shine the light, because I do think that's one thing we often forget to do, is just to celebrate and to see the good things that are happening when we're drawn towards negativity. So my question for you is, how can family councils shine the light on good things and kind of use that as a stepping stone to engage in, culture change initiatives in their own home?
That's a great question. So part of our Color It culture change journey was using the words, and I give the example of Nike. I highly doubt, so I make this up, but I highly doubt that someone invented the Just Do It slogan and swoosh, and then no one ever talked about it, and it just became a national phenomenon that when you see the swoosh, you know that it means just do it. I suspect that people got very tired of hearing just do it and seeing the image for it to become so second nature. And so we challenged ourselves to use the color it language. We actually set indicators. So you're going to try to use it this many times in a week, and you're going to notice that you're using it. And so then we added color it stories to our standing agendas. So family council could encourage or suggest or add to their family council meetings celebrations, a good news and celebrations section to their standing agenda, and ask for people to share stories. And people will just blink at you, and that's okay at first. And then they'll start to see, because it doesn't need to be somebody went skydiving. Well, that is a super amazing color it story, person-centered care story. So also is Joe really wanted to go outside and shovel the sidewalk. It was maybe moderately blizzardy, but it was in a secured location. And so the staff made it safe, got him dressed appropriately. Out he went for 20 minutes. That sidewalk was driving him crazy because he really wanted it shoveled off. He had a great time, felt very useful, succeeded in his purpose, and then safely came back in. That's a color it story where we might have been compelled to say, no, it's a blizzard. That door's locked. You don't need to go out there. But that's not what the team did. So it's noticing those things and then encouraging people to notice it and talk about it. The saying I like to remind myself is, what we appreciate appreciates. So if we're always looking for negative things and bad things and things that we did wrong, or time savings, we need to look for those things. But if that's all we ever talk about, that's all we ever talk about. So we need to take time to look for the good things and the positive things, and then notice them and call them out.
Thank you so much. Some great ideas for councils to maybe bring into their next meeting. Do you have any tips for dealing with culture change resistance, whether it's within other family members or whether it's within the home, when councils are trying to engage in having conversations of bringing in some initiatives?
Sure, and this is real, and we faced it in the early days, and we continue to face it. Even with the universal masking example, some people were worried, like, we shouldn't let it be up to families and residents whether we do this. And it wasn't entirely up to families and residents, but they have a role to provide their recommendation and should have a chance to have a voice and learn the whole context and talk through the story and the options. So there is resistance. And within the staff, some of the resistance is this feeling that if we are talking about a culture change journey, it must mean that we were bad before. And so we needed to pay attention to say that that's not the case. It's not that we were bad. It's that we have opportunity to change the way that we provide care that really aligns with what we dreamed of. So again, it's going back to the vision, less about the people or the process and more about what we wished for, what we dreamed for, because then it's about how we want to behave, not who is behaving that way, right? It kind of takes some of the personalness out of it, and just makes it a little bit easier to have some of those conversations.
Thank you. And there's someone who's saying, wonderful work. They want to know how they can get in touch with you, maybe if they have additional questions, or, if they want to delve a little bit deeper into one of the specific things like talked about in the session today.
Sure, happy to chat with anyone. Please feel free to reach out. I don't see that my contact info is on my slides, so I'll make sure that Kathleen gets it, and we'll include it when the slides and the recording is circulated to participants. And please feel free to reach out. If you have other ideas too on how you're engaging with families, or how as family members there's an opportunity to engage, it's a chance for us to see that maybe we've missed some opportunities.
I'm seeing lots of hearts and lots of thumbs up. So, and no other questions are popping up, and some applause. So I can tell that the session is being very well received, and is definitely something that's hitting home with a lot of those who are attending right now. If you're watching the recording, we hope that these messages are also hitting home with you. I will pass it over to Sam, who will wrap up the session and let us know what else we have in store. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Really great questions, everybody.
Thanks so much again, Jennifer. It's always a pleasure to have you speak and for you to share your experience and your wisdom. And I can say that Jennifer, her what she speaks about, the importance of caregivers, co-design, and walking the talk is something she conveys to the sector as well. So this isn't just a public version. Jen and Grey County really do walk the talk when it comes to culture change, engaging families, and really building and achieving a vision of person-centered care. So thank you so much for spending your time with us today.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Thanks again. And now, everyone, we have I'm going to be going into lunch in a couple of minutes, but I just wanted to do our first door prize draw. So the first door prize is going to be the wrap, the shawl from Positive Inception, based in Sudbury. And Positive Inception, a few of our team members were able to go up to Sudbury earlier in October to visit this store, and met the owner. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the brand. So the goal and mission of the Positive clothing line is to remind people about the amazing things in life and help people gain positive perceptions, to help people expose themselves with passion, imagination, and creation, to try and make this world we live in easier for people and more positive, to lead by example, help spread love, compassion, and help people persevere with their dreams. And it's, I'm sure, something that resonates with you here, and to be able to lead with positivity within your homes. The owner of the store, Ryan Benoit, was born with cerebral palsy, and we had the pleasure of meeting him as well. And he wanted to create something really to show positivity in the world and to have a positive impact on the general public. And so we thought, what better way to do that than with a clothing line? So you can literally wear your positive intention on your sleeves, on your shirt. There'll be more in, we'll include a little pamphlet about the brand to the winner, but we encourage you to check out more Positive Inception store, or thepositiveinceptionstore.com. And now the winner of this first item by random draw is Heather Moxley. So Heather, thank you so much for joining us today. I see you're here with us in the webinar space. We are going to get in touch with you to get your mailing address so that you can receive the wonderful knit poncho. It'll keep you warm over these cold upcoming winter months, and we hope that you will wear it with pride. So everyone, thanks for those who have joined us. We're going to take an hour for our lunch break. So we'll be back at 1:30. And we are going to be at that point talking about another amazing culture change approach with Kipling Acres. They are going to speak about their caregiver support group. So in that session, think about how you could implement this at your home. Whether you're a council member or a home team staff member, think about how this is doable and how you can continue to support meaningful caregiver engagement in your home and provide families with some of what they need, that support, that education, help to bridge that knowledge gap. So once again, we'll be breaking for an hour for lunch. We'll be back at 1:30. So thank you so much for joining Jen Cornell for this session on Color It Connections, engaging caregivers in the vision of person-centered care. See you back in an hour.